In this video, we are going to be doing an overview of a mech which even during the Star League was an uncommon sight to see. A machine largely abandoned by its original manufacturer even prior to the collapse of the Star League as the folly of its concept was put on display in its latter days. This heavy battlemech seems to have fostered little following, and has been very limited in its appearance outside of technical readouts detailing it directly. Nevertheless, this vehicle would manage to re-emerge in the inner sphere, despite its lack of prominence and despite it seemingly being forgotten by history. With all of that said, let's begin to examine Wakahashi Enterprises' Bombardier. A heavy mech weighing in at 65 tons, the Bombardier is an obscure machine by almost any measurement. Less than 1,000 were produced for the Star League overall, with the original number being put close to 800, and it was one of the latest generation mechs to be introduced to the Star League as of its collapse, arriving just after its proposal in 2735. The request for the design was simple. The SLDF wanted something fast, and that could deliver firepower comparable to its much more venerable archer or artillery systems, and to do this also utilized a niche technology of its day, namely the Swarm LRM system. Without going into great detail, swarm missiles are meant to behave more like artillery than traditional LRM systems, and do much more damage to nearby objects around the intended target, behaving almost like a scattering of cluster bombs. The SLDF strategists even went so far as to believe that the Bombardier would be so successful at using these Swarm and Thunder missiles out of its launchers that it would be able to replace all of the traditional artillery in the SLDF, and plans were even drawn up to do this prior to the Amaris Civil War. However, these were all presumptions by military drills and tests, and had very little to do with real-world combat behind them, and had very little to do with data garnered from real-world combat. And these presumptions were assumed based off of wargames made by the SLDF. When the reality of war hit, first in the Amaris Civil War and then in the Succession Wars, these mechs proved to be wanting in their real-world performance. They lacked the range, hitting power, and endurance of a real artillery system, and when placed into mech units for standard combat duties, they would quickly find themselves out of ammunition and neutralized. The reputation of it became so bad that Wakahashi, its manufacturer, would literally abandon the mech's design, and didn't even try to downgrade this model for continued production, as it believed there was no demand, nor was there any reasonable way to generate demand. Earthworks in the Free Worlds League would see some value in this design, perhaps mistakenly so, and bought the design schematics from their counterpart, as well as licensing other elements to make their own downgrade refits during the Succession Wars, which, while it was in production in some numbers, found it possessed much of the same problems, if not more, than the original design. The Tendi would only manage to be a refit and repair kit for a small number of these mechs before it too lost almost all demand, even among the mech-starved houses. Comstar managed to keep some of these secured away in storage for their eventual Comguard forces, but it is questionable how much of a battlefield impact these would have. The BMB-12D is the main configuration of the Bombardier built for the Star League in its misguided attempt to create the ultimate fast support mech. This 65-ton behemoth is powered by a VOX 325XL engine, conferring to it a stunning maximum speed of 86 km per hour, or 8 movement points in the tabletop game. This is what the machine is literally built around, being able to be deployed to a situation rapidly to respond with indirect fire, direct fire, or artillery fire depending on the needs of units which it is supporting. This speed also meant that in many cases, the Bombardier might actually be able to escape a bad situation, unless being pursued by skirmishers, of course. But this enormous engine, though impressive, does add additional criticals for its engine spaces, which can increase its vulnerability to taking damage and being destroyed. The Bombardier uses the very sophisticated, for its day, double heatsink technologies. It can fire all of its weapons and run and not overheat as a result, even though it only has 10 stock double heat sinks, giving it a sinking capacity of 20. For artillery and support designs, of course their weapons are a major component of their concept. While the Bombardier is well served in some respects by these systems, it unfortunately lacks a very specific feature allowing it to participate on the battlefield for anything beyond a sliver of time. It boasts as its primary system a pair of Delphinius 20 LRM launchers, or LRM-20s, with one in each of its side torsos. The amount of firepower that these possess is more than impressive, with each one being able to lay down an array of fire. The main problem is each launcher has 1 ton of ammunition to draw off of while in the field, giving it only 6 turns of fire with normal ammunition types, or normal ammunition equivalent specialist munitions. This means it has half of the ammunition available to that of an archer, and against its peers of the same weight, this amount of fire is inadequate to win any kind of battle. This means that the Bombardier shows up, delivers several rounds of fire, and then runs dry of its ammunition and needs to be serviced and refit. Its only close-range system is another ammunition-dependent weapon, an Aerolite 4 SRM launcher, or SRM-4, mounted in its right arm, which, if this too runs out of ammunition, means that the Bombardier, if stuck fighting, literally must rely on physical attacks to defend itself. That SRM-4 is also highly inadequate as a weapon system to defend a mech of this size. The Bombardier spends over 1/3 of its weight on weapons, and spends it very poorly, not because twin LRM-20s aren't impressive, but because it literally can't afford to keep these hungry systems fed. The last important point to cover on the Bombardier is its very impressive defensive abilities. First, it comes with an anti-missile system, which, while this weight might have been better spent on more ammunition for its main systems, does do the job to help keep the Bombardier safe at range. Next, it has 12.5 tons of standard armor, which is extremely strong for a mech of this weight and yields it 200 points of physical outer defenses to incoming fire. Finally, there is a case to protect the right side from ammunition explosions, though this may not be wholly needed given how quickly the Bombardier will evacuate its ammunition just by operating at all. The Bombardier has one quirk, namely the bad reputation quirk. Some might say it is undeserving of this. It's a rapid response mech designed to rush to the front and provide special support. I, however, am going to argue to the contrary. It's fast, which would be helpful, but it cannot deliver enough meaningful support at ranges needed for as long as needed to change battlefield outcomes in most conditions, and it simply puts itself and its pilots at risk attempting it. It is a close air support aircraft almost, but one with no loitering time or ammunition. Its launchers are impressive, but their fire is short-lived, and its ammunition is so poor it cannot take shots which are risky, for fear of having nothing left after they launch. The Bombardier's lofty expectations were not met. Even its lower expectations were not met. It is a mech which costs an immense amount of C-bills for its time, and has very little to show for it. In other words, it's an expensive boondoggle for a vain military to have wasted an immense amount of money on. While more impressive than mechs such as the Charger, it's hard to say it's that much more impressive. It is on paper, just like it was supposed to replace artillery. On paper. Unsurprisingly, there are almost no variants of this mech. Literally, there are 4 in existence as of the time of this video. I will be covering only its downgrade as a result. Even after the Clan invasion, where the Bombardier would be seen once again as fielded by Comstar, its bad reputation is such that it never really amounted to anything. Earthworks would be the ones who believed it was wise to try to keep the Bombardier out of the grave, and would design the refit package after the Second Succession War, as well as replacement parts and repair kits. It is meaningfully unchanged, barring it now possesses a Magna 260 standard engine to propel this machine at 64 km per hour, given the loss of XL engine technology. The BMB-10D also loses its anti-missile system and replaces it with a machine gun. It also switches to single heat sinks for the same reason, and thus begins to have a heat problem, potentially throttling its ability to provide consistent fire. Not that it matters much, given that it only has 6 turns of fire for both launchers anyway. That's all! That's all that changes. Now, this isn't the worst downgrade ever, but that's only by virtue of the fact that the Bombardier was already a terrible mech. All this does is make it more terrible, by making it less survivable and less heat efficient. It's hard to say that this was a wise business decision by Earthworks, and it's hard to say that the mech warriors who were sent out to die in this machine appreciated their efforts. How many widows and parentless orphans did Earthworks contribute to making in the succession wars with this refit? It's hard to know, given its low adoption and production numbers. All the same, there should have been more lawsuits against this type of malpractice, even in Battletech. The Bombardier is one of the worst mechs conceptually in the history of Battletech, in-universe. It is a failed machine in most measures. Wildly expensive at the time of production, all for a practical task that could not be performed even if it had more ammunition for its launchers. It would only be less of an embarrassment. It is a failed artillery mech, and only through favoritism did 800 plus of these machines get made during its era. While its upfront attack may conceal its weakness, it only takes a few turns of being incapable of firing, either due to ammunition or due to fear of wasting that ammunition, and you will see this mech for what it is. A paper tiger, built around an idea that never came to fruition. It is among the worst designs of 3025 and 2750. It may not wear the crown, such as the Charger, or be the silver medalist like the Urban Mech, but it's definitely going to take home the bronze for being an inadequate artillery machine and an inadequate archer. Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There is new content on this channel very frequently, and I appreciate your support. Also, a huge thank you to all the YouTube members who support this channel, as these videos are only possible because of viewers like you. With that, I will catch everyone in the comments section below.